My name's Brian, and we'll be building my PC today.
Do you want to talk about some of the parts you've chosen?
Okay, so we'll start off with the processor. We have the AMD FX 6300. Then we've got 8 gigabytes of G-Skill Ripjaws. It's 2133 speed. Hyper TX3 cooler by Cooler Master. We have a 1 terabyte WD Blue hard drive. And 120 gigabyte SanDisk SSD. For the video card, it's a R7 370 4 gigabyte gaming card, and then an MSI 970 gaming motherboard. I also have a EVGA 500 watt 80 plus certified power supply and the Spec 02 from Corsair.
So the first thing we're going to be doing in this build is we're going to first unbox the motherboard, take out all the accessories and everything it comes with, and then we are going to take it out of the anti-static bag that it ships in so we can place it on the top of the box to proceed working on it. Next, we are going to get the CPU and install it into the CPU socket. You always want to make sure that you align the CPU correct before you put it in, as you may damage the pins and they will never go in. After you put the CPU in, you have to push very firmly on the little bar or it will not go in all the way and it will be seated right above it. Next, before we install the heatsink for the CPU, we're going to install our RAM because our heatsink sits right above it. Now that we have 2 DIMMs of random access memory, we can put our thermal paste on our CPU cooler and proceed to putting that on top of the processor. Once you have the thermal paste on it, you always want to make sure that you're aligned before you put it all the way down, as it's kind of hard to correct it after. Once we got it seated nicely, we put the bars on and allowed it to connect to the motherboard. It's time to get the motherboard standoffs ready so we can put the motherboard inside of the case. Now we're going to put the I/O shield in, so that will allow the ports to be able to poke through on the back of the computer. There you can see the I/O shield is in. Now we had to remove the power supply after it was already put in because the motherboard wouldn't sit in there properly with the power supply there. So we took that out, and then the motherboard went in nicely. We could screw that down and put the power supply back in that after. After having a little bit of trouble aligning the motherboard, we got it, so we are now screwing in all the screws and making sure that standoffs are under each screw, so we are grounding out the motherboard. Now we can put the power supply back in as the motherboard is seated correctly, and we can wire it up again. Here we are connecting the 24-pin cable and the power cable for the other side of the motherboard. And we brought the cables in through the back so it would look tidy and neat through the window. Next, we're going to be opening the graphics card and installing it onto the motherboard. Here we have the graphics card in the computer and mounted to the motherboard. We're just screwing it onto the back of the case. Now we're going to be getting the two drives out, one 1TB Western Digital blue drive and another SanDisk SSD. First, we're going to slide in the SSD onto the top of the racks where there are two SSD or 2.5 compartments. Down below is where the 3.5 bays are, which is what the Western Digital drive is, because it is a traditional disk hard drive. Now that those are both in, we installed the SATA cables and connected those. And it was time to plug it in and test out the first boot and make sure everything worked. Here you can see the LEDs came on and it looks very nice. There's a red LED fan in the front along with LEDs on the graphics card and then a fan in the back that was also spinning nicely. Here we can see we got it booted up and the BIOS opened just fine, so we had done everything correctly.